Well, welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be in Chapter 5, and Chapter 5 deals with the more emotional affect dimensions of leadership. Today we're going to be looking at the head and the heart of the leader. We're also going to be taking a look at mental models. Now, of course, when we look at the head and the heart, we're talking about not only the science of management and leadership, but we're also taking a look at the way that the leader regards the worker. And of course, the best model that we can glean from is Jesus Christ himself. So today we're going to be taking a look at that. We're also going to be taking a look at systems approach and how we can take a look at the organization, not just as a bunch of separate entities, but as a whole. So let's go ahead and start this morning with Chapter 5 as we look at the head and the heart of the leader and mental models. All right, welcome back, everybody. This week we're going to be in Chapter 5, and we're going to be looking at some more dimensions of leadership from an individual perspective. And this week we're going to be looking at the mind and emotion. Now, the author starts out with a slide here with dealing with the head and the heart. And in the past, really the leader only worried about turning a profit for the organization. That's what he was hired to do. There was very little regard for the worker. They really didn't care too much about the worker other than the worker producing enough for them to be able to turn a profit. But over the years, and especially now since diversity and globalization and technology have emerged, now they've had to rethink all of these things and their attitudes and the way that they treat employees today. So today, they've come to realize that a whole leader uses the head and the heart. Now, the head is for the organization, and these are the things that you are learning in school: accounting, management, leadership. All of these skills that you're learning really go for the organization. But when it comes to human resources and the human side of it, you're doing that to garner an appreciation for the worker. So it takes a combination now of both head and heart to be able to lead effectively. Now, some of the current issues that we're dealing with in this area is to give people a sense of meaning and purpose. You know, theologians and philosophers will all tell you that people seek meaning and purpose. Well, it's no different in an organization. People want that. Well, I say many people want that in organizations today. Now, you're going to have those who just want a paycheck. There's no getting around that. But there are people in organizations, and I believe they're growing, who want to feel like they're contributing more than just work. They want to be able to use their God-given abilities, those KSAOs that they come to the organization with, and derive meaning and purpose from that. And as a result, they want to feel valued and respected. You know, everybody wants to feel that way. Just to be lifted up, we need some more Barnabases out there who can come alongside the Pauls of the world and to just encourage them and let them know that they are valued and that they're respected. That can go a long way in an organization when they feel like you recognize them and recognize them for the good that they're doing and not just for the mistakes that they make. And how to keep morale and motivation high. Well, if you've got the first two going for you, chances are they're going to be motivated and their morale is going to be up there. It may not be stellar, but you'll have them at least appreciate you, and they appreciate what they've been given to be able to contribute to the organization. Now, mental models are theories people hold about specific systems in the world and their expected behavior. Really, mental models depict the way that you think about things. Some people are just one-dimensional. They can't think out of the box. You tell them what to do, they'll do it, but really, there's not a lot else you're going to be able to get from them. And there are people who are just expecting, if I do this, this, and this is going to happen. So these are linear, kind of one-dimensional type of thinkers. They're needed in the workplace, but they may not be the best ones to be able to lead and inspire and understand how organizations work today. Systems approach takes a look at everything. And I've taught this course And I've taught this concept in other courses. But when I talk about systems theory, what I try to tell people is imagine yourself in the forest. When you're in the middle of the forest, all you see are trees. You can only see the trees in front of you. You can't see anything else. Systems thinking is being able to back away from the trees and see the forest as a whole. And organizations are kind of like that. If you take a look at just one department or another department, all you're going to see are independent entities. Being able to step back and see the whole organization will give you a better appreciation for how that organization interrelates, how it's interdependent, how it affects the overall performance of the organization. I talk to people all the time in some of my graduate classes, and they don't have a clue how their input or their contribution affects the overall performance of the organization. They just show up for work, do their time, and go home. And that's really not a good way to be. So systems thinking allows you to step away from the trees to see the whole forest. And we have kind of an example of that here in the next slide. Now here you have elements of a system. And you have the battery, you have the wire, you have another wire, and then you have the light bulb itself. Now, independent, each one serves a purpose, but it can't perform its overall goal to let that light bulb shine. It's going to take a combined effort of all of these elements. First of all, it's going to take this wire, and I'm assuming it would go to red, and this wire, because it's green, would go to green, and then these two would be connected to the light bulb, and as a whole, they will be able to light or do what they're supposed to be doing. Now, everything will be fine and well and good, but what happens if this battery loses its charge? It no longer can function. Well, that's going to affect the wire, that's going to affect the bulb, and really, how will it affect them? They won't be operable. They won't be able to do what they're meant to do. So systems thinking takes a look at the whole instead of each individual part here. And when you take a look at an organization from this perspective, you start to appreciate how the interconnectedness, how the interdependence, the interactions can affect your organization, and you start managing from a different point of view. Now, systems and mental models, I've just talked about that. A system is the whole instead of specific entities. You're taking a look at the whole, and a mental model helps leaders attain the desired outcome by arranging the elements in the system. If you remember, when you saw the battery and the wires and the light bulb, you have to go in a order. Each one is set to do what they're supposed to do. For instance, you might not be able to set the bulb on the battery and it work. You have to have the red wire connected to the bulb, but you would also need the green wire also connected to the bulb. So each one is important, and each one has their own place in that overall ability to let that light bulb shine. And that's how it is in organizations. Everybody has a place, everybody has a responsibility, and each one affects the inputs and outputs of the other. Now, Google's leaders have mental models. Stay uncomfortable. Well, that's pretty much the mantra today for most organizations if they're going to survive. You can't rest on your laurels or your accomplishments. You have to be innovative, and you have to be thinking about the next thing that comes down the line. Let failure coexist with triumph. Now, that's not so much of a popular edict in most organizations today. Failure is something that we try to avoid. However, at Google and in some cultures like Japan, they allow failure to happen. If you have the freedom to fail, then you're going to be more bold, you're going to be more innovative and creative. You're not going to be as timid and reluctant to branch out, step out in faith, and try new things. Use a little less management than you need. And that means just turn the reins over. let the workers do what you've paid them to do, what they're supposed to be doing. Defy convention. And that's what we teach in change management. As the environment changes and as organizations have to change, we have to change our models in the way that we lead them and so forth. Move fast and figure things out as you go. Now that is industry specific. There are some that you may not have that opportunity as much as other organizations might, but wherever there's innovation and the opportunity for change, you need to take advantage of that. Now we're going to take a look at Google's Working for Google video, and when we get to the other side of it, I'll talk about that here in just a minute. Well, you saw Working for Google, and you saw the environment. What you saw were really the positive aspects of Google. They are fun-loving and all of that, but I can assure you it's not all fun and games. These people have tight schedules. They are very much under pressure to be innovative and so forth, and that's why they create an environment like that to offset the pressure and the demands that are placed on them and so forth. But you get an idea of how organizations that have to be creative and innovative will do whatever it takes to foster that creativity and so forth. Now this slide talks about assumptions. Assumptions are just some of the things that we do without their conclusions that we draw or inferences that we draw without maybe having all the fact. They're part of a leader's mental model about events, situations, circumstances, and people. They can be dangerous if they are accepted as truth, and questioning assumptions can help leaders understand and shift their mental models. For instance, it's dangerous for a leader to assume that all workers are motivated by money. Who is to say that some workers are motivated just by doing a good job or contributing to that company and so forth? So you can get yourself in a lot of hot water if you just assume things without verifying them. And that goes along the lines of ministry as well. I can't jump to conclusions or assume things about my church members until I know for a fact what's going on and the circumstances that are surrounding whatever I may have to deal with. So it works in ministry and it also works in businesses. Changing or expanding mental models. My church had a saying, not the church I'm at now, but one of the previous churches where I served had a saying, we've never done it this way before and we're not about to start. That's fatal today. In fact, I don't even think that church is around anymore, but that's a fatal way of thinking today, especially when it comes to business. Change is the only thing that's constant, and your ability to adapt and adjust and change your mental models of leadership have to change with it. As we're becoming more sensitive to and as we become more organic as an organization, the old way of thinking about leadership where I'm the boss, you're the employee, do what I say, and having that type of autocratic mentality can really just pretty much nail the coffin lid shut on your career. You have to be able to adjust, and you have to be able to expand your way of thinking. Well, how do you do that? Well, for me, the Bible. I saw Jesus evolving his disciples, expanding their ways of thinking and so forth, going from just a selfish, me-oriented type of way of thinking like Peter would do, or maybe Matthew or James, to where they started caring more about others. And that's more of a transformation that takes place, and that has to take place in you. But we see Jesus, when you want to see the model of head and heart, that's Jesus. Jesus taught, he spoke truths to the disciples, but he also lived life with them. He was patient, he was kind, he developed them as a shepherd and as a good teacher. And that's how we have to be in organizations today. But evolving your way of thinking through the Bible, through other examples such as the CEOs of these Googles and Facebooks and Microsofts and all of that, seeing their philosophy, seeing how they lead, how they create mental models of leadership can help you too. So a lot of it is just doing research and reading, watching others who are successful at it and emulating them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you do need to incorporate a lot of the modality that they're using today to be able to motivate and stay above the competition. A global mindset is the ability of managers really to appreciate and influence individuals, groups, organizations, and systems that represent, really a global representation. So it's taking what you've learned in this microcosm and expanding it into a macrocosm, where you're going from an organization now to a global mindset. These mental models, these principles that we're teaching, these are the ways that you can better your organization. But when you can expand it across cultures and societies and political arenas and so forth, that's when you have developed a global mindset. And then finally, our last slide talks about developing a leader's mind. Independent thinking. That has to be cultivated. One of the hardest things for me to do when I left the military after 20 years was to come up with an independent thought. Most of the time I was told what to do, or there was regulations or rules and guidelines and so forth. I really didn't have to think about a whole lot. All the thinking was done for me. And that was a handicap for me when I got out into the real world, in this world of competition and innovation and creativity and so forth. So I had a big learning curve in that area. But if I could do it, you can too. Open-mindedness, not being closed off to possibilities and so forth, but being open. One of the things that I've always done as a leader, I didn't care how high they were or how low down on the strata they were. If someone had enough in them to offer a suggestion to me, I felt that it was important for me to listen. So individuals don't just pop up with things off the top of their head. Many of the suggestions that I had through my career came from people who had thought about issues, they took the time to think about it, and they cared enough to share it with me. And as a pastor or as a business leader, I've learned so much from every walk of life who was a part of that organization or that ministry, and I'm better for it. Systems thinking, again, is to just be able to look at the forest and avoid just the trees. Personnel mastery, and that's just getting a handle on the people side of business and human resources. Well, that's it for today. We'll come back tomorrow and carry on. Well, today we saw how a leader has to not only know how to do the job and turn a profit in an organization, but we also saw how a leader has to be able to connect with the people, to have a unwavering regard for them, to care about them, and both of those combined can make a fully developed leader and one who's going to be effective in the workplace. We also took a look at mental models. How do you think through situations? Are you the linear type that looks at one step after the other, or are you able to step back and be able to take a look at the whole situation and be able to look really at the forest instead of just the trees? Well, again, as I suggested during the lecture, I would recommend you take a look at some good leaders out there, good godly leaders. See how they incorporate mental models, the heart and the head into their model of leadership, and also take a look at the Bible. You know, there are great examples of people who have demonstrated good and bad leadership, and we can learn from them too. Well, have a good day, and we will start back tomorrow as we carry on with Chapter 5.